comments over and over again, because she just said basically, if Youngkin wins, it means a disaster for the Democrats in 22 and 24. I happen to think she's right. There will be a disaster because they're too far to the left. They're spending too much money, and they're too alienated from the American people. Something which Selena Zito wrote a brilliant column on this morning, that they just don't get it. And I saw this yesterday. I was watching Georgia win over Florida. Sorry to say that to my Florida friends. But I watched a lot of commercials for both Terry McAuliffe and for Glenn Youngkin. And what was fascinating was McAuliffe's commercials are very political. Glenn Youngkin's talking about real life. He's talking about jobs. He's talking about children. He's talking about safety. He's talking about schools. So the difference in the two commercials, the sets of commercials, I saw about 12 or 14 of them, was remarkable, and I think partially explains why McAuliffe is losing. He's lost in a world of fantasy that really matters to left-wing Democrats, but doesn't matter to the average Virginian.
So, Vince, what do you think about Newt Gingrich's assessment there?
Well, I think when it comes to the campaign ads and the messages these guys are running on, Terry McAuliffe has had a real problem getting his message to take hold, even in the media. So what McAuliffe has tried to do in these waning weeks of the election is, you remember in Mortal Kombat, there was a character called Liu Kang. You remember that character? Mm-hmm. And so in Liu Kang's signature move was the sweeping leg kick. So like what you do is you get your opponent up against the wall and they just keep sweeping leg kicking them, and they can't get up, they can't jump, they can't move. And it's the same move you use over and over and over and over again, and then you win. And that's it. Fatality. It's the end of the fight. McAuliffe is under the impression that his Liu Kang sweeping leg kick is to say the name Trump over and over and over and over and over again. So much so that there was you had Joe Biden come to town recently, about a week ago. And when he did, I believe it was like a 17-minute speech he gave, and he mentioned Trump's name 24 times. Now, this is not a Trump race. This is a race between Glenn Youngkin and Terry McAuliffe and the array of candidates who are on the, I'll just say, the undercard, but running alongside both of them. But what McAuliffe needs to do, kind of to your point about messaging, is he realizes that Trump is unpopular in Northern Virginia, and by invoking his name, he might be able to get enough Northern Virginia voters out in order to bring him over the top. So he has to keep saying it. And so the end result has been that when he sits down to do these interviews with various outlets, he's been cutting them off short. So there was a local television interview that was done recently where Glenn Youngkin sat for 20 minutes. So McAuliffe's campaign is like, okay, now we want our 20 minutes. So McAuliffe sits down. He only makes it 10 minutes. He only makes it 10 minutes because the questioner is not, playing ball with his talking points, and he just bails on the interview. In fact, not him personally, but one of his aides is like, all right, that's enough. We're done. We got to go. Leaves. He did the same thing with Axios. Axios did an interview with him, and they wrote about this. They asked, hey, tell us about your strategy of constantly trying to tie Glenn Youngkin to Trump. And he goes, I'm not tying Youngkin to Trump. Youngkin's tying himself to Trump. And they cut off the interview. They bailed on it again, because really it gets at a central point, which is that McAuliffe is very reliant on this, and it's just not working. It hasn't been working for him. And that is really the theme. I'm on his email list, man. I get all of his emails. It's always about Trump, and it's not about Youngkin. Whereas Youngkin, the campaign he's running on, is actually an issues-based campaign. He's running on schools and parents and, and COVID, and
it's culture war stuff. He's running on all that culture war stuff. Oh, critical race theory.
He's pushing back. He's pushing back on the culture war.
Yeah, no, he is feeding into the culture war. But either way, I think you're right. That I think we've got a little bit of Trump fatigue in the Democratic Party, and I think one of the things that I believe it was Jon Stewart said is like, all right, like Trump's a dirtbag, but we can't make everything about Trump, or else we keep Trump relevant. Like, we need to start running on what it is that we believe in. One of the things that I always stand for is, instead of always talking about what you're against, start selling what it is that you're for.